Hi there, my name is Matthew. I'm a strategic systems consultant with Quest Software. Today I'd like to talk about the version control root within GPOADmin. For folks that are new to GPOADmin, this is one of the aspects of it that takes the most getting used to. Traditionally and natively with group policy, we have the group policy management console. And within the group policy management console, we see a view of Active Directory that looks kind of like ADUC, except that it doesn't enumerate any other kinds of objects other than GPOs that are linked. And we see a container that if we looked at Active Directory users and computers wouldn't be there, the group policy objects container. And within here, we have a great big list of all the GPOs in a domain. So for small domains, this is actually kind of handy. It makes sense. It's quick. It's easy. You just have a list of GPOs there. But just like if you had a file system, like a Windows file share, where you could only have a single folder and only have all of your documents within that folder, pretty soon it starts to get kind of unwieldy. And particularly it gets unwieldy when you need to provide different permissions to different objects for different users. So of course, natively, we would need to go into each of these group policies and change the delegation for each of those according to who would need to get access to what. So for that reason, within GPOADmin, we do things a little bit differently. GPOADmin has something called the version control root. The version control root is a hierarchical, container-based sort of repository for all managed objects within GPOADmin. It doesn't matter what kind of object you are working with within GPOADmin, whether that's a GPO, whether that's an OU, a WMI filter, a script, desired configuration object, even an Intune configuration profile. They all need to go somewhere within the version control root. Just like in an NT file system, the container structure is really where ideally you're going to want to set most of your options and most of your security, your workflow, etc., for each set of objects that you are governing. You can see inside the container options, we have a security tab. This combines the group, that's who's getting the rights, the role, that's what the rights are, and of course, it's, this container, are you blocking inheritance in this container, or are you just adding these permissions to this container? But essentially, that's your combination of things. Who's getting the rights, what the rights are, and where the rights are being granted. Additionally, like I mentioned, this is where we set approvals, generally. So from here, we can set for each of the 3 different kinds of actions that you can perform within GPOADmin, create, modify, delete. We can set different approval flows for those. But there's more things that we also set at the container level. Notifications. So when you want to subscribe to a notification as an end user, and if you have the rights to do so, you right-click, choose properties, and you go through and you select what you want to be notified on. Other features as well, things like remediation. This is how GPOADmin can react to changes that occur outside of GPOADmin itself. We've got a video coming up on that specifically. Or things like protected settings, which sort of control the rights control the settings that you're able to set in a GPO. Or things like change windows, attestation, naming conventions, they're all set here. Now, granted, it is possible to go on a GPO by GPO basis and sort of override a lot of these, but ultimately it's just like working with an NT file system. For ease of management, we recommend creating a container structure where you don't have to go and override individual settings very often. You can set them at the container level. So this ends up always sort of begging the question, because when you install GPOADmin, you're going to have a blank canvas. You're going to have just a space, and there isn't really any sort of like, all right, well, we're going to set up these containers by default. All you have is the empty version control root, and it's up to you to design a container structure, just like again, if you had a Windows file share, all you have is a big blank area. You need to create the folders to properly sort of categorize and store the objects. So a question I often get is like, all right, how do I do this? What's a good practice for this? Well, as you might expect, there isn't any one right answer for this, but I can kind of share what seems to generally work amongst my customers. So firstly, know that one of the sort of design restrictions here is that an object can only exist in one of these containers. So we can't have an object be in more than one container. And then beyond that, my recommendation is always to design the version control root and the containers they're in to be as simple as you can, but no simpler. I know that's kind of a silly quote, but the idea behind this is usually you want to create a set of top-level folders that correspond to the top-level groups that work with GPOs within an organization. So in this lab, of course, this is a little different because we have a number of different, pre-sales engineers that use this. So we organize it by pre-sales engineer, myself, Rob Malakote, etc. But for production implementations, what we usually see are top-level folders like desktop, desktop engineering, directory services, Windows servers, Unix servers, Citrix servers, or remote desktop, basically collected around the end users of GPOADmin that are going to need to work with group policies and OUs in kind of a specific subject area. And the reason behind that is then we can set permissions, like again here at Unix team, we can set permissions at this level and let those flow down to containers underneath. So that kind of tends to cover the top level containers. Underneath of that, it really depends a lot. And I say that because underneath of there, usually at bare minimum, we'll have a couple of subcontainers, one that contains group policy objects, usually one that contains scopes of management or OUs, in order to just simply kind of keep things organized. Or you may also have a dev test prod methodology that you have to sort of design around. And in those, then often you'll have a subcontainers that contain GPOs that are in testing and OUs that are used to test against. And very often those containers will have either a simplified or even no sort of approvals required so that you can quickly sort of develop and work through the testing process there and then graduate the objects from the testing containers into like the actual production containers. So again, underneath that, it becomes very specific to both the group that's using it, as well as to just simply how group policy administration works in any given org. But starting with your top level and working your way down from there, I find is generally the best approach and the most successful approach to design the version control root. Hope this has been helpful and look forward to talking to you again. Thanks.